"That medal's fake, lady. I'm serious. That's the Medal of Honor. You don't just wear that around a base like it's some yard sale pin you found in a shoebox." The voice cut clean across the parade field, young and pleased with itself, pitched to carry. Private First Class Cody Reinhardt stood at the edge of his formation, in a uniform pressed so hard the creases could have cut bread, one arm flung out toward the woman by the reviewing stand, playing the moment for the 24 trainees near enough to hear. A few of them laughed. A few families in the near bleachers turned to look. The morning was already hot, the flag hanging limp on its pole in the still air, and the whole post seemed to be holding its breath for the companies that would soon march on. It was the kind of morning the Army builds these ceremonies around. The bleachers had filled since dawn, with mothers in their good dresses, and fathers in shirts still creased from the package, with little brothers running the aisles, and grandmothers fanning themselves with the printed programs. Down the long green rectangle of the parade field, the guidons hung waiting, and past them, the training company stood in the shade of the far buildings, minutes from stepping off. There was a smell of cut grass and hot metal, and the coffee somebody was selling from a folding table by the gate. It was a good day, a proud day, the kind of day families drive 9 hours to sit through. And into that good day, a 19-year-old had decided to make himself the center of attention the only way he knew how. The woman he was pointing at did not turn her head fast. She did not color. She did not answer. She was perhaps 38, lean in a plain blue jacket zipped halfway, standing a little apart from the crowd with the ease of someone who had waited in worse places than this. High at her collar, above the zipper, sat a small ribbon, light blue, dotted with white stars, the medal itself hidden under the fabric. To a 19-year-old 3 days from being called a soldier for the first time, it read like a prop, like something bought. She had been shouted at in her life by men who meant it, men with the muzzle already up, and the shouting had been the least of what they brought. A boy in a clean uniform on a bright morning did not move the needle. She let her eyes rest on the far tree line where the units would step off, and she stayed still. 20 yards down the flank, Sergeant First Class Roland Beck stopped watching his trainees. Beck was 44 and had spent 26 of those years learning to read men in the half-second before they lied. He had come out to dress the formation, and his eyes had crossed the woman by the stand, the way they crossed everything. Once, to file it, and then come back, because the file did not close. It was not the ribbon, though he had seen the ribbon and felt something cold walk up his arms. It was the way she stood. Weight even on both feet. Hands quiet at her sides, not fidgeting, not folded defensively, just quiet. Eyes moving across the field in a slow, economical sweep. Reading it, he realized, the way he read it. The way a person reads, ground they might have to move across. She was not looking at the crowd. She was looking at the terrain. "Come on," Reinhardt called, warming to the laugh he'd gotten. "Say where you got it. Gift shop. Costume rental. They do a nice line in fake heroes down at the surplus store." His battle buddies grinned. One of them, a broad kid named Kessler, elbowed the trainee beside him and jerked his chin at the woman like she was a show he'd paid for. An older man near the fence, a father or a grandfather, gray and stiff-backed, said, "Son, that's enough. Leave the lady be." Reinhardt flapped a hand at him without looking, still grinning, still on. The confidence of it was total. He had been told for 9 weeks that he was becoming something, and today was the proof. And here was a soft civilian target to prove it on. Beck did not smile. He took one step out of his lane, then another, closing the distance to the formation the long way, which happened to bring him nearer the stand. He wanted a clean look at the ribbon. He wanted to be wrong. The woman shifted her gaze at last, off the tree line and onto Reinhardt. It was not a glare. It was a look, level, patient, complete. The kind of look that takes the full measure of a person in the time it takes to blink, and then sets them down again gently, because they are not worth keeping in the hand. It lasted a half-second longer than comfortable. Reinhardt's grin flickered just at the corner, and he covered it with a louder laugh. She said nothing at all. Beck's jaw tightened. He had seen that look before, across a lot of years and a lot of countries, on the faces of a very few people, and never once on the face of someone who was pretending. He looked again at the light blue ribbon and the 13 small white stars, and he thought, with the slow horror of a man watching a boy walk onto a road, he cannot see the truck coming down. That is real. That is the realest thing on this field. He had learned to read stillness the hard way, in places where the stillest man in the room was the one you watched most carefully, because stillness in a dangerous person is not the absence of motion. It is motion held on a leash. He had known operators, a bare handful across a career, who carried themselves exactly like this, who took up less space than their bodies, who let the loud men in a room fill all the air because they had learned that the loud men were rarely the ones who mattered. Those people did not raise their voices. They did not have to. And when they finally moved, the room found out too late what it had been standing next to. He glanced at Reinhardt, still preening, still pointing, still narrating his own bravery to a laughing crowd. Something was wrong with this picture, badly wrong, and Beck was the only man out here who could feel it. He started walking, not toward the boy, but toward the command tent, faster now. The companies had not even marched on yet, and the morning had already made its terrible mistake. Reinhardt, riding the crowd, had no idea he had picked it. For a while, the mockery held the shape of a joke, and jokes on a parade ground move fast. While Beck angled toward the tent, a cadre sergeant on the far side of the formation barked a correction. A trainee in the second rank had dressed his line the wrong way, drifting left when the command was right. Before the cadre could repeat it, the woman by the stand said quietly, almost to herself, the correct command and the cadence under it, a half beat ahead of the drill sergeant's voice. No one in the crowd would have known the difference. Beck, 10 feet away and slowing, knew exactly. She had not raised her voice. She had said it the way a person says a thing they have said 10,000 times, the words worn smooth. It was not a civilian's guess. It was muscle. Reinhardt, who had lost his audience for a moment, reeled it back in. Hey, metal lady, what unit were you in? For pretend, I mean. Give us the fantasy." His buddies snickered on cue. She answered him. She did not defend, and she did not perform. She said flatly, "A medic's line. A place in Kunar province. A ridge. The kind of detail a person does not invent, because inventing it would require having been there." She said it and looked back at the tree line. Reinhardt barked a laugh. "Kunar? Sure. What, you watch a documentary about it? My cousin's got a whole shelf of those." The crowd laughed with him, because he was loud and sure, and the woman was quiet, and a crowd will side with volume every time, until something teaches it not to. Beck did not laugh. He had been to Kunar. He knew how the word tasted in the mouth of someone who had eaten dust there, and he knew how it sounded coming from someone who had only read it. The woman had said it the first way. It was a small thing, and it was everything. Beck had spent 2 tours in that province. He knew the way the valleys funneled the wind, and the way the ridgelines turned an afternoon patrol into a fight nobody chose. He had carried men off ground that looked exactly like the ground the word conjured, and he had left a piece of himself up there the way everyone did who went. To hear a stranger say that name in a costume shop tone would have been an insult on any morning. To hear this stranger say it the true way, and then be laughed at for it by a boy who thought Kunar was a documentary, curdled something in his chest that had nothing to do with the ribbon at all. He stepped in under the pretense of straightening the nearest trainee's cover, which put him close enough, for 2 full seconds, to see the ribbon plainly. Light blue moire, white stars. And below the collar of the plain jacket, when she moved, the top edge of the metal itself, the pale metal, the shape he had seen exactly twice in his life, both times in rooms where generals stood at attention. His stomach dropped. He looked at her hands then. Scarred across the knuckles, nails cut to the quick, a discipline to them. No rings, no fuss. Working hands. Hands that had been inside people. He knew the look of those too. "That's a Medal of Honor," Beck said, but only to himself, only under his breath, and the saying of it out loud in his own skull made it true in a way that turned the morning cold. The woman's eyes came off the tree line and touched him. Just him, for a moment. And there was the smallest change in them, an acknowledgement, one professional recognizing another across a fence he had not yet climbed. Then she looked away, giving him nothing that would give her away to the boy. Beck turned to the drill sergeant beside him, a younger cadre named Ruiz, and said low, "Watch that one." Not the boy. The woman. Ruiz followed his eyes, saw a civilian in a blue jacket and grinned. "The costume lady? Sergeant, come on." "Watch her," Beck said again, and this time there was no room in it for a grin, and Ruiz's faded. Beck was already moving toward the command tent, where the reviewing party was gathering, where a 2-star general was pinning on his cover, where somebody with rank needed to hear, in the next 90 seconds, that the guest of honor was standing at the fence line being called a liar by a private who did not know what a liar was. He walked faster. Behind him, the laughter kept rolling, and he understood it now for what it was. The sound of men laughing on a train track. Reinhardt, warm and winning, leaned toward his buddies. "Watch this," he said. "I'll get her to admit it." And the joke, having run as far as a joke could run, got ready to become something else. The something else arrived the way these things do, not as a decision, but as a dare passed, hand to hand, until nobody owned it. Kessler was the one who said it. He was broad and loud, and looking to be liked, and he leaned toward Reinhardt with a grin and muttered, "Take the Halloween medal off her, man. It's plastic. Bet you it comes off in your hand." The trainees around them made the low noise a crowd makes when it wants to see something happen and is telling itself, it won't. Somebody lifted a phone. "For the group chat," a kid said, and turned the lens on the woman in the blue jacket, filming her stillness like it was content, framing her as the joke of the morning. She let them. That was the thing that Beck, glancing back once as he reached the tent flap, could not stop seeing. She let all of it happen. The stiller she got, the harder they pushed, because her calm read to them as fear, and fear on a parade ground draws the young the way blood draws the young. It was exactly backward. The calm was not fear. The calm was the most dangerous thing on the field, folded up small and holding still out of a courtesy they had not earned. There is a particular cruelty that only a crowd can manufacture, and it was manufacturing it now. No single one of the trainees would have said the worst of it alone, standing by himself in front of a woman with quiet hands. But together, they made a machine of it, each one feeding the next, each laugh lowering the bar for the laugh after it, until boys who had been raised right and would be ashamed of this by supper were leaning in to see a stranger humiliated for the crime of standing still on a bright morning. Vaughn had seen the machine before. She had seen it in worse rooms than this, worn by harder men, and she knew the only thing that reliably broke it was not argument and not anger. It was time, and it was truth, and both of those were already walking toward the field in the person of a 2-star general who did not yet know he was needed. In the bleachers, The gray-haired man had gone quiet. He was staring at the ribbon now, and his mouth had thinned, and his hand had found his wife's arm. He half knew. A younger woman beside him, somebody's sister, up from somewhere for the big day, looked from the old man's face to the woman by the stand and felt the morning tilt without understanding why. "Reporting as ordered, General Nobody," Reinhardt said, and snapped her a mock salute, elbow high, fingers splayed, a parody of the thing he'd spent 9 weeks learning to do right. The buddies roared. It was the best bit yet. The woman held his eyes through it. She did not return the salute, and she did not flinch from it. She simply watched him do it, the way a teacher watches a child throw a tantrum in a store, without anger, without embarrassment, with a patience that had somewhere in it the faint, sad knowledge of how this ended. And down the flank, Beck ducked into the command tent, took off his cover, and began to talk fast to a sergeant major whose face was about to change. If you have ever watched The Loud Mistake, The Quiet for the Weak, stay with this one and subscribe to the Veteran Vault. It stopped being a joke between one breath and the next. "Just knock it off her," Kessler said, louder now, past caring who heard. "It's plastic. Prove it." And Reinhardt, who could not now step back without losing everything he'd built in front of the crowd, reached out and took hold of the ribbon at her collar. Her hand rose to meet his. It did not hurry. It came up the way a gate comes down, unhurried and complete, and closed around his wrist. One calm, immovable beat, and Reinhardt's fingers, a half-inch from the metal, stopped as if they'd hit a wall bolted into the earth. He pulled. Nothing moved. For 1 second, his whole young strength met something that did not acknowledge it, and his eyes went wide before his mouth could decide what to do. Then she let go, before anyone quite saw the grip at all, and folded her hand back at her side. Reinhardt staggered a half step and covered it with a laugh that came out wrong. "See?" he said, too loud. "Guilty. Look at her. Guilty." The commotion had drawn a junior cadre sergeant over from the far end. Not Beck, a younger one, flustered, seeing only a civilian in the wrong place making his trainees late. He put himself between them, more annoyed at her than at the boy, and said, "Ma'am, I'm going to need you to step back behind the fence line. If you can't produce identification for that award, you can't be up here by the stand." The institution, for one ugly minute, had picked the Loud Boy's side by simple reflex, because the Loud Boy was in its uniform, and she was not. She looked at the young sergeant without heat. She did not reach for a wallet. Reinhardt smelled the wind change in his favor and leaned all the way into it. "That's stolen valor," he announced, turning to the crowd, arms wide, the prosecutor now. "That's a federal crime, lady. You know that. You can go to prison for that. I'm reporting you. I'm going to get my drill sergeant and the general and whoever else. And you are going to be sorry you wore that thing to my graduation." The junior sergeant, whose name was Pace, and who had been in the Army for 4 years, and had never once in those 4 years been near a real medal like the one at the woman's throat, felt the situation getting away from him and did what frightened men in small authority do. He clung harder to the small authority. "Ma'am, I'm not going to ask again," he said, and his hand hovered near her elbow, as if to steer her. He did not quite touch her. Some instinct, older than his rank, told him not to touch her, though he could not have said why, and the not touching was the first true thing he'd done since he walked over. The woman in the blue jacket let the noise of it wash over her and settle. Then she said, quietly, 4 words, without a thread of threat in them. "Bring whoever you want." She went still again, and the junior sergeant, wanting the problem to be small and gone, reached for the radio on his shoulder to call somebody up to sort out the civilian by the stand, not knowing that down in the command tent, Sergeant First Class Beck had already reached a very different somebody, and that the sorting had already begun, and that it would not go the way the boy in the pressed uniform had promised. Inside the command tent, the air was cooler, and the light was green through the canvas, and Beck stood in front of the battalion sergeant major with his cover in his hands, and said it plainly, because there was no time to say it any other way. "Sergeant Major, the guest of honor is standing at the fence line getting called a liar and a thief by one of my trainees, on film, in front of the families. She's in civilian clothes, and nobody up here recognized her. Somebody needs to move. Now." The sergeant major, a barrel of a man named Odom, who had thought this morning's largest problem was the heat index, went very still himself. "Say that again." "Captain Vaughn," Beck said. "Blue jacket. She's wearing the medal. A private just put his hand on it." "You're certain?" Odom said. It was not really a question. He had served with Beck for 2 years, and had never known the man to bring him a thing he wasn't certain of. But you asked, with something this size, because the cost of being wrong ran in both directions. "Sergeant Major, I did 2 tours in the province in the Citation she's wearing," Beck said. "I have seen exactly 2 of those medals in person before today, both on men who don't have to buy their own drinks anywhere in this army. I know what the ribbon is. I know what her hands are. And I watched a private of mine put his fingers on it 90 seconds ago while a crowd filmed it. I have never been more certain of anything. And every second we stand here talking, it gets worse for that boy and for this post." Odom was already moving, and behind him, an aide to the reviewing general had come half out of his chair, and the temperature of the tent had changed entirely. Out on the field, the sun did what the sun does to young men who lock their knees and hold still too long in wool and starch. A trainee in the 3rd rank, a thin kid who'd been swaying for a minute without anyone clocking it, went down. Not a stumble. A drop, all at once, the way they go, straight down and boneless, his head snapping toward the packed grass. Cadres started toward him from the flanks. They were not the closest. The woman in the blue jacket was already there. She crossed the ground between the stand and the 3rd rank faster than anyone would have guessed from her stillness, and she was on her knees beside the boy before the nearest drill sergeant had covered half the distance, and her hands were already working. Airway first. Chin, jaw, a finger sweep, her ear to his mouth. Then the sharp, calm voice, cutting through the panic of the trainees crowding in. "Give him room. You, get his feet up on your shoulder. Hold them there. You, go to the aid station. Tell them heat casualty, conscious pending. Moving now, go." Pulse at the throat with 2 fingers. A hand flat on his chest, counting. The jacket collar loosened. Every motion economical, ordered, without a wasted gesture. The whole sequence running off her like water off a roof. Beck came out of the tent at a near run with Odom a step behind, and stopped dead at the edge of it, because there she was, kneeling in the grass in her plain blue jacket, running a textbook casualty response on a fallen soldier while the drill sergeants were still arriving. And he knew those hands now, past the ribbon, past the stillness, past any possible doubt. He had watched 100 medics work. He had watched perhaps 3 work like that, and all 3 had been the kind of people the Army built quiet legends around. The junior sergeant who had ordered her behind the fence stood frozen, watching the costume lady run the exact drill he had spent months teaching in a classroom, cleaner than he had ever run it himself. The trainee's eyes fluttered. He came back. "There you are," she said to him, so quietly only he could hear it. The oldest sentence in the medic's book, the one you say to a frightened kid to bring him the rest of the way home. "There you are. Stay with me. You're all right. You just cooked a little. Happens to the best of them. She kept talking to him, low now, gentle, keeping him with her, until the aid crew jogged up with their bag and their litter. And then she handed him off in 3 flat sentences of correct terminology. What she'd found, what she'd done, what they'd need to watch, and stepped back and let them have him, and was still again, as if she had never moved. It was the phrase that undid Beck in the end, not the ribbon, and not the wrist, and not the way she'd read the formation. It was "there you are." 2 ordinary words said in a tone he had heard exactly once in his life, from a medic on the worst day of it, kneeling over him, bringing him back. You did not learn that tone in a classroom. You earned it on ground that took something from you in exchange, and it never left the voice after. He stood there in the grass of a peacetime parade field and felt the years fold over on themselves, and he knew. Reinhardt had gone quiet. It was the first time all morning. Beck walked over and stood above the recovering trainee and looked at the boy who had started all of it, and said, low, so it carried only as far as it needed to, "Son, you have no idea who you just did that to." What the boy in the pressed uniform did not know is what the next few minutes would teach him. Subscribe so you do not miss it. Kunar Province, 2010. The air on the ridge was thin enough to make a strong man stupid and hot, and it smelled of dust and crushed pine and the diesel ghost of the trucks they'd left in the valley. Specialist Delia Vaughn was 22 years old, and she was the medic, and she was walking 4th in a patrol strung along a goat trail with a drop on one side and a wall of rock on the other, and she was thinking, mostly, about water. Then the ridge opened up. The fire came from 2 directions at once, from above and from across, and the sound of it flattened the world. The point element went down into what cover there was, and the call came back down the line the way it always came, the word every medic hears in their sleep for the rest of their life. "Medic! Medic up!" She moved. There is an arithmetic to it that no one who has not done it will ever feel in the body. And the arithmetic is this. Between her and the man calling for her, there were 40 meters of open rock, and there was no cover on any of it. And the guns that had opened the ridge could see every inch. The arithmetic said stay. She had never once in her life been able to make the arithmetic win. She went out across the open, low and fast, and the rounds walked the ground around her boots, and she reached the first man and dragged him back by his gear into the lee of a boulder and put her hands in the wound and made it stop. Then she went again. Corporal Aaron Teague was the steady one, the one who had covered her first crossing with his own body and his own rifle, 24 years old, from a town he described so often the squad felt they had lived there. He was laughing about something even during, the way he did. On her 3rd crossing, he went down in the open, hit twice, and she reached him and got him behind the rock and worked on him with everything she had and everything the ridge would let her have, which was not enough. "Tell me you got the others," Teague said, his voice going thin, his hand finding her sleeve. "Just tell me that. Tell me you got them back." "I got them," she said. "Everyone. You covered me, and I got them." He believed her, because it was true, and because she had never lied to him, and the belief eased something in his face. He held onto her sleeve. She kept her hands where they needed to be, and kept her voice level, and kept telling him he was going home, and the ridge kept firing, and Aaron Teague died under her hands in the open country, with his fingers wrapped in the cloth of her sleeve. She closed his eyes with her thumb, because there was no time to close them with anything else, and she said his name once, and then she made herself stop saying it, because there were men behind her who were still alive, and who would not stay that way if the medic knelt in the open grieving. That was the hardest arithmetic of all, the one nobody ever puts in a citation. The arithmetic that says you must set down the one you could not save, this instant, and pick up the ones you still can, and carry the setting down for the rest of your life instead. She had learned it on that ridge at 22 years old, and she had never unlearned it, and it had made her calm the way pressure makes a stone hard. The squad leader fell a minute later. Vaughn took the casualty collection point because there was no one else to take it, and she held it. 4 more wounded men, hers now, laid in the only cover on that whole cursed slope. And she kept all 4 of them breathing through 40 minutes of fire until the birds came screaming up the valley and put their rockets into the ridge, and the world went, at last, quiet. She carried Teague's name down off that mountain. She had carried it every day since. This was the act a citation would one day describe in its flat and formal language. The crossings, the wounded recovered, the point held. And there is no citation ever written that could hold the weight of the sleeve his hand had gripped, or the sound of the town he'd described, or the exact arithmetic of the one she could not carry back. In the grass of a parade field 16 years later, the same woman knelt over another young soldier, older now, her hands still knowing the work, and rose and was still. The field around her did not know what it had been looking at all morning. It was about to find out. Reinhardt could feel the morning turning against him, and he was 19, and 19 does not know how to lose a crowd quietly. The families near the fence had stopped laughing. His own battle buddies had gone still, watching the cadre, watching the woman, doing the math their private had not done. Kessler had drifted a step away from him, the way people drift from a man about to be struck by lightning. So Reinhardt did the only thing his pride knew how to do. He got louder. "You want everyone to think you're some kind of hero?" he said, stepping toward her as the cadre began dressing the formation for the pass-in review. "Then prove it. Right now. In front of everybody. Or take it off. Take the fake medal off and admit it, or I swear I am reporting you the second the general." He grabbed for the ribbon a second time, harder, a real snatch, his whole shoulder in it. She let it come. That was the thing. She turned, a few degrees, no more, a movement so small the crowd barely registered it, and his snatching hand closed on empty air where the ribbon had been a quarter second before, and his own committed weight carried him forward and past her, and Private First Class Cody Reinhardt stumbled into nothing in front of the bleachers and the phones and his mother. He caught himself before he went all the way down. It was worse than going all the way down. The narrator's eye, if it could speak, would have said only this: she spent no more motion than a breath. She had not pushed him. She had simply not been where his violence expected her to be, and the violence had spent itself on the air, and that was the whole of it. A gasp went through the near crowd. The gray-haired veteran was on his feet now, cover in his hand, standing the way old soldiers stand when they see a thing they know. Kessler grabbed Reinhardt's sleeve. "Man, stop! Stop!" Too late. The boy's dignity was already lying in the grass, where his own hand had thrown it. Somewhere in the bleachers, a woman's voice said, "Cody." Low and horrified, the particular tone of a mother watching her son do a thing she cannot take back for him. He heard it. Of course he heard it. A boy always hears his mother in a crowd. It landed on him and did not stop him, because pride at 19 is a runaway thing and cannot be flagged down by shame, only by a wall, and the wall was coming. He straightened his uniform with hands that had started, very slightly, to shake, and he told himself the crowd had seen her trip him with some trick, that it wasn't real, that he could still win this if he just held the line one more minute. Every word of that was a lie, and part of him already knew it, and that was the worst part, the knowing underneath the shouting. Vaughn reached up, unhurried, and set the ribbon straight at her collar. Then she looked at Reinhardt, and she said something quiet, and there was something in it that was almost kind. "I'm not going to fight a boy on a parade field," she said. Stand at attention. The general's coming. You're going to want to be standing right when he gets here." Reinhardt laughed. It was a small, cracked sound, the last laugh he had, and he did not understand that what she had just handed him was a mercy and a warning folded together, the only lifeline anyone was going to throw him all morning. The loudspeaker crackled to life above the field. "Ladies and gentlemen, please rise for the reviewing officer." Boots came together across the whole parade ground, rank on rank, a sound like a single door closing. The families stood. Reinhardt turned toward the reviewing stand, dragging the smirk back onto his face, out of pure habit, out of the only self he had. The smirk had about 10 seconds left to live. Major General Harlan Prewitt was 2 stars and 32 years, and a walk that told you both without a word, and he came along the front of the reviewing stand at an even pace, returning the salutes of the cadre, running his eye across the formation the way generals do. His eye crossed the fence line. It crossed a woman in a plain blue jacket standing a little apart from the crowd. It came back. He stopped walking. For a moment, the whole ceremony hung on a 2-star general standing motionless at the front of his own reviewing stand, staring at a civilian by the fence. Then Prewitt stepped down off the stand, a thing generals do not do, and crossed the grass to her, and he came to attention in front of the woman in the blue jacket, and the field made a sound of pure confusion, 1,000 people not understanding what they were seeing. "Captain Vaughn," Prewitt said, and his voice was not a general's voice now. It was quieter than that. "They didn't tell me you'd come early. If they had, I'd have met your car myself." Reinhardt's face began to change. Prewitt turned to the microphone stand at the front and lifted it and faced the formation, and the confusion on the field sharpened into something breathless. "Before we begin," the general said, "you're going to stand where you are, and you're going to listen, because most of you will serve 20 years and never once be this close to what is standing on this field right now." He did not read it off a card. He knew it. "The President of the United States, in the name of Congress, takes pride in presenting the Medal of Honor to Specialist Delia Vaughn, United States Army, for conspicuous gallantry at the risk of her life above and beyond the call of duty." His voice carried flat and enormous over the speakers, and he laid it out. The ridge in Kunar Province in the year 2010, the ambush from 2 directions, the 40 meters of open ground, crossed not once, but again and again under direct fire. The wounded recovered one by one, the casualty collection point seized and held for 40 minutes after the squad leader fell. The 4 soldiers who came home alive because a 22-year-old medic would not accept the arithmetic. And he read the name that was in the citation, the name of the corporal she had not been able to carry back, Aaron Teague. And on the field, a great many people who had been laughing an hour ago found they could not swallow. He read the crossings, that she had gone out into the open not once, but repeatedly, each time knowing what the ground was, each time going anyway, because the alternative was to listen to a man call for a medic and not answer, and she had never in her life been able to not answer. He read that she had pulled 4 wounded soldiers back one at a time, across fire-swept ground. He read that when her squad leader fell, she had taken command of the casualty collection point and held it for 40 minutes until air support arrived, refusing evacuation for herself, treating the wounded under continuous fire, and that all 4 of the soldiers in her care survived. He read the sentence that always comes in these citations, the flat formal words that cost more than any others to earn, with complete disregard for her own safety. And on a parade field in the summer heat, those words did not sound formal at all. They sounded like a door opening onto the exact thing the whole morning had refused to believe. The cadre did not wait for the citation to finish. As the words rolled out, drill sergeants snapped their trainees to present arms, rank after rank, hands coming up in salute. The families in the bleachers rose fully, and the phones that had been filming a joke came down, and hands went over hearts. Beck stood at the flank already at attention, his eyes bright and fixed on her, a man witnessing a thing he would tell for the rest of his life. The field that had laughed went utterly, ringingly silent, filled only with the general's voice and the flag now stirring, at last, in a little wind. And Cody Reinhardt's face ran the whole distance in the space of a sentence. Confusion first. Why is the general saluting the fake? Then disbelief, a hard shake of the head at what could not be true. Then recognition, arriving all at once and from every direction. The way she'd said Kunar, the hands on the fallen trainee, the wrist of his own that he could not move, the 4 words, bring whoever you want. And then, last and worst, horror, cold and total, as he understood that he was standing 3 feet from a Medal of Honor recipient, on film, in front of his mother, and that he had called her a liar and a thief and had put his hand on the medal at her throat. Prewitt finished the citation. He turned to Vaughn, and the 2-star general brought his hand up in a slow, exact salute and held it. Delia Vaughn returned it. Then she turned her head, unhurried, and looked at Cody Reinhardt for the 2nd time that morning. And this time, the boy could not hold her eyes, and his gaze dropped to the grass, and his chin, for the first time in 9 weeks, could not find level. The cadre closed on Reinhardt the moment the salute came down. Sergeant Major Odom reached him first, with Beck astride behind, and the words came low and clipped and terrible in their calm. Relief for cause. The words, separation, and board and conduct unbecoming. The fact said plainly that the film of it was already leaving the post in 100 pockets. Reinhardt stood gray-faced in the wreckage of his own graduation morning and tried to find something to say, and found nothing. There was nothing. His mother was somewhere in the bleachers behind him. He could not turn around. Vaughn stepped in. "Sergeant Major," she said. A word. Odom stopped. Everyone stopped, because a Medal of Honor recipient had spoken. And on this field this morning, her quiet voice outweighed every set of stars and stripes present. "He's a boy who hasn't been shot at yet," she said, looking not at the cadre, but at Reinhardt, so that he had to hear all of it. "He doesn't know what the thing at my throat costs, because nobody he loves has paid it in front of him. He will. Let him learn it standing up, on this field, in that uniform, not on his back with a separation packet. Let him graduate. Let him carry today for the rest of his career. That will teach him more than any board ever could." She turned to Prewitt. "General, I'd take it as a personal favor." Prewitt looked at her for a long moment, and then he nodded. "Because you do not refuse that voice a favor. Not that one." "The captain's request stands," he said. And the cadre stepped back, and Reinhardt stood swaying in the space where his ruin had been a second ago, spared by the one person on the field with every right to end him. Honor the ones who carry it in silence. Subscribe to the veteran vault, and let this soldier's story find the people who need it. The ceremony went on. It had to. That is the mercy and the machinery of the Army, that the day continues. The companies passed in review, boots striking the grass in one voice, and when Reinhardt's company came around the turn, he marched it changed. Chin level now, but level in a different way. Eyes forward. The bravado burned clean off him. A boy carrying something for the first time and carrying it upright. Vaughn watched him pass from beside the stand, and if there was any judgment in her face, there was more of something else, something closer to hope. After, in the loose milling minutes when the formations broke and the families flooded the field, Reinhardt came to find her. It took everything he had. He stopped a respectful distance away and stood at a rough, sincere attention and could barely get it out. "Ma'am, I'm sorry. I don't have anything else. I'm sorry." She let the apology stand a moment, not making it easy, not making it hard. Then she said the one true thing she had for him. "This," she said, and touched the ribbon at her collar, "isn't mine. I just carry it. It belongs to 4 men who came home, and 1 who didn't. And every time somebody calls it fake, it isn't me they're calling a liar. Remember that the next time you're sure about a stranger. That's the whole lesson. Now go find your mother." He went. He looked back once. She had already turned away. Beck found her a minute later, at the edge of the emptying field. He did not have a speech ready. Men like Beck rarely do. He came to attention and he held it, and when she told him to stand easy, he did. And then he said the only thing that was true. "I was a medic save, ma'am, long time ago. Different valley, same province. I've spent 20 years hoping I'd get to stand in front of one of you and say thank you and mean the whole thing." She looked at him for a moment, one professional to another, and something passed between them that the morning's crowd would never have the language for. "You just did," she said. "Now go take care of your boy. He's going to need somebody who isn't me." Beck nodded and put his cover back on, and went to do exactly that. Later, when the field had emptied, and the heat had gone flat and white over the grass, Delia Vaughn walked to the far edge of the post, to the low memorial stones set in a quiet arc under a stand of old trees, where the names of the installations fallen were cut into the granite. She found the one she had come for. She always found it. She knelt, and she laid 2 fingers against the cut letters of the name, Aaron Teague, and she stayed there a while in the stillness that had unsettled a whole parade field, the stillness that wasn't fear and never had been, but only the shape a person takes when they have learned exactly what the world costs and have decided to keep paying it anyway. A pace behind her, cover in his hands, Private First Class Cody Reinhardt stood without being asked. Having followed at a distance he thought she hadn't seen. He didn't speak. He had finally learned when not to. He simply stood and looked at the name under her fingers, and began, 16 years too late to have laughed, and right on time to begin, to understand. She did not send him away. She let the boy keep the vigil with her, because that was how it was passed down, from the ones who carried it to the ones who would have to, in silence, on quiet ground, a long way from the noise. There would be a story on the post by nightfall, and a story is a living thing. It would grow in the retelling, the way these stories always do, until every trainee who marched that morning would swear he'd been in the front rank when the general crossed the grass. Let it grow. That was how it was supposed to work. The names on the stones stayed the same size, cut deep and permanent under the old trees, and the stories grew around them like ivy, and between the two, the fixed grief and the growing legend, a young army learned, one graduation at a time, what the quiet ones had carried, so that the loud ones could stand on a green field in the sun and be called soldiers. She rose. She looked once more at the name, and then out at the empty field, and then she walked back the way she had come, unhurried, complete, a woman the whole morning had underestimated and would never forget. Some warriors fade quietly into the years, but the valor never leaves them. Honor the ones who carry it in silence. Thank you for staying and watching. Subscribe to the Veteran Vault for more.